Vietnam, a place once ravaged by war, stricken by pain and poverty. Can old scars really heal? And what remains after that? What memories remain that reminds us of the pain you once had? Buildings, stories, or spirits? Here's 12 real ghost stories. From long-haired red ghosts to supernatural cats, child-eating demons to old friends who just want to say their last goodbye. Grab a blanket, turn off your lights, and let's fly to Vietnam together and experience the memories for ourselves. The lady in the red dress. I've been a lurker here, and this is my first post. I've debated on whether posting this or not because it's quite long and also quite different from the majority of the stories posted on here so far. My little disclaimer is that I identify myself more of an existentialist, except there are some things that I cannot explain, and it makes things more confusing for me, as I'm sure many of you guys can relate. I'm Vietnamese, Chinese, and French. So as you can guess, it's an Asian ghost story, yet nonetheless true. I was born in Vietnam and lived in a house that is known to be haunted. We moved to the US when I was about 3 years old or so, but I remember every single night for dinner, my father would light up a joss stick and we would sit and wait until the joss stick had burned down to its nub. I later found out it was to pay respect to the spirits living with us, and can be quite common in the Vietnamese and Chinese culture. By waiting, it means that we are waiting for them to eat first. Then we were allowed to eat after the joss stick had burned down. Anyways, the layout of the house is very important. My house was very small and the attic is the second story. So imagine a living room, bedroom, diner all in one. There was a small square cutout that attics normally have, and there's a wooden ladder. Right underneath that space behind the ladder was my parents' bed. I'm not good at math, or I'd give you an example in square feet. This was before I was born, and my mother told me that this was her experience. She was sick and sleeping in her bed while everyone was off at work. She felt a little stagnant cold air and it woke her up. We live in the tropics, so it's hot and very humid. As you can guess, we were very too poor to have air conditioning. In fact, many businesses didn't have air conditioning at that time. Anyways, when she opened her eyes, she saw a pair of red shoes and a part of a red traditional Vietnamese dress, flowing, as if someone was sitting on the edge of the attic's opening, kicking their legs like a child would. There was nobody, just the shoes and the dress. She was aware that she was sick and perhaps hallucinating things, so she turned around and went back to bed. About what seemed like an hour or so, she felt that stagnant air becoming really icy cold, so she rolled around to grab her blanket. What she saw was the red dress and the shoes again, floating in the corner near the door. That's why I explained the layout of the house. It is not a big space, so she saw it quite clearly. She prayed in case it wasn't her being sick and she was actually seeing things. She kept her eyes closed and she prayed. She was awake by now. She told the spirit that she's a clean person, so there's no reason for the spirit to bother her or her family. She asked the spirit to leave our house. She had the courage to do so because she always told me, if you didn't do anything wrong, there is nothing to be afraid of. About 10 minutes later, she felt the room got warm again, and when she opened her eyes, the spirit was gone. Some key details I want to point out for you guys. In the Vietnamese and Chinese culture, wearing anything red and showing up as a spirit, it means it's an evil or menacing spirit. Perhaps that spirit was a wanderer. We don't know and we don't want to know. Yes, my mom was fully aware that she was sick and she thought she could have been hallucinating things too, but she said she wasn't severely sick and she was wide awake during the second appearance. I know it sounds so crazy, but I have quite a bit of stories in that house as well. So it's up to you to believe it or not. Feel free to debunk it because I need some answers too. Asian ghost story here. Long-haired lady and my sister's vanity. So my sister told me this story about her encounter when she was little. Our house in Vietnam, growing up, was haunted. I've submitted a story here when the subreddit was still in its infant stage about the lady in the red dress, the encounter from my mother. Anyways, so my oldest sister told me when she woke up in the middle of the night, at around 2 a.m. she was very cold, which is very unusual for Vietnam, especially during that time. Not even many businesses had air conditioning, let alone residential areas. She was in between being awake and asleep and said that she saw in the corner of her eye a lady with her back to my sister sitting at her vanity, combing her long black hair. My sister was so scared and started praying in her head till she fell asleep. The next night she told my brother to sleep next to the wall. They shared her room, and when he fell asleep, she covered him up to protect him for superstitious reasons. She knew that she could have experienced was just a nightmare, but due to her house's history, she wasn't taking any chances. She then covered herself up with just a peek hole through the light blanket. It was hot as hell. That night, she woke up again from a stale, cold atmosphere again, also around 2 a.m. Sure enough, it wasn't a nightmare, and there, at her vanity, was the same lady in a white pajama dress, combing her long black hair at her vanity. The lady must have sensed my sister looking at her this time that she started to slowly turn around, stood up, and walked towards my sister. She said her hair was long and black, her face pale white, and her eyes are just white. I swear to you, this was way before the movie The Grudge even came out. So when I saw that movie, I thought my sister's story and wanted to pee my pants. It's a very common practice for Vietnamese people to sleep on the floor, as it is a luxury to even have a mattress. Anyways, my sister said that the woman's feet didn't touch the floor, they just kind of floated a few inches above it. This is a common belief for the Vietnamese that ghosts cannot touch the floor. So my sister, of course, squeezed her eyes shut, scared shitless, and the lady crouching next to her body on the floor. The lady then hovered her hand from the top of my sister's head all the way down to her toes. And my sister described it as an isolated, stagnant, icy coldness that followed her hand, didn't touch her, just hovered. My sister had been praying a specific chant in her mind as if her life depended on it. She didn't even remember how long it had been, but she no longer felt that stale, cold air. That lady was no longer there when she opened her eyes. So that day, confirming it wasn't a nightmare from the first night, she set out a small offering of rice, a couple of fruits, and incense that prayed to the spirit to move along from our house. She never saw the lady again. The white clothes and dress that's so popular with Asian ghosts is, from what I believe, due to old culture. From my understanding, the Chinese used to wear white pajamas back in the old days because they believed that their soul would leave their body at night to wander, thus meaning your physical body is dead. This was explained to me by the elders, and since the Chinese have conquered Vietnam for over 1,000 years, our culture is very similar. I'm mixed, in case you're wondering. Sorry this is very long and I'm on my phone, so forgive my grammar and all that good stuff. My mom died when she was 23. I've never met a ghost before, but I've always believed that there is a world for our souls after we die. When my mom was 23 years old, she died. Everybody thought they had lost my mom. She was put into the coffin and was waiting to be buried the next morning. It was amazing. My mom revived at 2 a.m. She made the coffin fall down to the ground. Everybody opened the coffin to check and saw that they did not lose my mom. My mom came back from the world of the dead. She said those days when she died was like a dream, a very long dream. And what she saw in the dream helped me understood more about the Vietnamese customs about dead people, about funerals, and about the world after we die. Awesome. Haunted house in Vietnam. Back in the early 60s, my father, who was a Philippine Air Force officer, was posted in Saigon as a military attaché. So he lived in the then South Vietnam for 3 to 4 years during the early part of the Vietnam War. For reasons unknown to me, we moved houses 3 times. The second house we lived in was old and very huge, more like a mini mansion. We actually rented just the bottom part of the house, while the owner, an ethnic Chinese Vietnamese widow, and her 2 daughters lived upstairs. I remember my sister and I used to go upstairs for tutoring by one of her daughters about basic French, as we attended a French school. We also attended American school on our last year in Vietnam. The house was situated beside a cemetery, and what to me seemed so odd even at that time was there was a gate near the back part of the yard which opens to the cemetery. The layout of the house looks strange too. There's a huge lounge room, big enough for a dance floor space, and a short hallway to my parents' bedroom and bathroom. And then there's this large dining and entertainment area in between, which separated our parents' bedroom and our bedrooms and kitchen. My brother had his own bedroom, and us 3 sisters, at that time we were 7, 8, and 10 years old, slept in one king-size bed together. Our bedroom doesn't have a door, but my brother's room has one, and we can see his door from our bedroom. From what I can recall, I was 7 years old. I was waken up by our bedroom window shuddering, as this was a stormy night and the wind was howling through the louver window. It was quite spooky and I couldn't go back to sleep. Somehow I felt that something was going to happen. I saw a headless figure in what appeared to be a long black coat, floating from our bedroom to my brother's room as it disappeared. As it disappeared, I saw a part of a skeleton appear which looked luminous, peering through the crack of the door hinge of my brother's bedroom door. His bedroom door was always left slightly ajar. I felt paralyzed while I was witnessing the apparitions. I tried to wake up my sisters to tell them what I just seen, but they were too tired and didn't seem interested. I couldn't go back to sleep as I was too scared that the ghost might come near me. The following morning, I told the family what I've seen during the night. To my relief, they believed me. My sister also said that they were aware that I was trying to wake them up and told them what I have seen, but they said they were too scared, so they pretended they were asleep. From then on, I believed in ghosts and spirits. Haunted hotel in Vietnam. My last paranormal experience took place 2 months ago during my trip to Vietnam. My wife and I were staying in room 215 at a hotel. On March 5th, at 2:30 a.m., a violent argument broke out in room 216 and woke me and my wife. We distinguished a man's voice and that of a woman who quarreled together, but curiously, we could not hear a word of what they were saying. It was like a confused hubbub. We also heard smacking objects, knocks, banging on our walls, and doors slamming. Suddenly, someone opened the door of room 216 and slammed it fiercely. Then we heard someone running loudly in the hallway and banging on all the walls and doors, including ours. The person ran down the stairs and climbed back immediately before continue hitting the walls and the doors. Out of the blue, the individual started to turn the handle of our room violently as if he wanted to enter. I sat up on the bed and pulled my pants on, but my wife was holding my arm. She refused to let me go have a look. It was our last night in Vietnam and she did not want anything to happen to us. Suddenly I heard a liquid spreading outside our door as if a bucket of water was poured. I then got up from my bed. My wife told me not to go, but I told her that I had to do it just in case a crazy guy pours gasoline on our door before setting it on fire. I grabbed an empty beer bottle in passing and I opened the door. There was nothing and no one. No trace of liquid on the floor or on our door. I heard only crickets. The whole floor was quiet. I closed the door and said to my wife that there was nobody. My wife asked me to call the front desk. I told her, we'll see in the morning, and for now it's time to sleep. My better half, paralyzed with fear, gripped me tightly and was unable to sleep. For my part, I pretended to be asleep, but I was as scared as her. With my feigned carelessness, I wanted to reassure her and make her think that, with me by her side, she had nothing to fear. In the morning, we went straight to the reception to tell the clerk what happened during the night. The employee replied to us that he was behind the counter all night and has not seen or heard anything. Moreover, he assured to me that the room 216 was unoccupied since Saturday. My wife retorted that it was impossible. We were not hallucinating. The boy repeated that all the rooms on the second floor were unoccupied, except for ours and the room 214. The customers of the other room had left early in the morning. The conversation went on for 10 minutes and obviously it wasn't going anywhere. Tired, my wife told me that we should have our breakfast and get ready to go to the airport and pulled me away from the counter. Before our vexed air, the employee suddenly revealed to us that he remembers now. Customers from room 214 had returned completely drunk late at night and had forgotten to take their keycard at the reception. Then they started banging around and became noisy. The clerk then went upstairs to give them their card. I asked him if he really believed what he said. If things really occurred like that last night, why did he wait for 10 minutes to explain it? How could he forget such an event? And how to explain the noises coming from the room 216? The employee looked down. He lied, but why? During our lunch at the terrace, the waitress told us she could not help but heard our conversation with the clerk at the reception. She told us that we were not the only ones who experienced strange things on the second floor, and many stories circulate about this hotel. Finally, she informed us that the corridors are equipped with cameras. We thanked her, and after our meal, we headed to the reception. The clerk had finished his shift, and it was now a young girl behind the counter. We explained to her our misadventure of last night and required to see the video recordings. To her surprise, she complied immediately without waiting. She did some research on her own device and invited us to go behind the counter to look at the screen. At 2:30, nothing happened for 5 minutes. At 2:35, we could see me open the door of our room and look in the hallway. After my inspection of the floor and the door, we could see me go back to the room and close the door. That's it. Unlike my previous paranormal experiences, I was less afraid this time because my wife saw and heard the same things as me. If we could assume that I dreamed or hallucinated my ghostly encounters, there was someone else with me in the hotel. It seems highly unlikely that my wife has had the same exact dream or the same hallucinations. In addition, video recordings show that I indeed moved to open the door and do an inspection. Suicide Road. Okay, this really happened. About 10 years ago, I lived in Vietnam, in a small urban town called Thu Duc. 1 year before that, one of my neighbors, a kid, decided to skip school on a hard rainy day to go play soccer with his friends and take a bath in the rain. While playing, he kicked his soccer ball into a small puddle, so he decided to go after it. Who would have guessed? A power line snapped because a piece of roof cover was blown by the harsh wind and fell on it. The kid was cruelly electrocuted as he ran into the puddle to get his ball. I mean, the son of a gun was literally charred. Because of the sadness for the mother, our town decided to bury the kid where he died, and the insider decided to call the small passage where the boy died Suicide Turn. But the story is far from over. No one from our town ever used Suicide Turn. It was never used after the sunset because we all believed that it was haunted. If you want to see it for yourself, come to Suicide Turn in Thu Duc around 10 o'clock. You can literally see a small child kicking a ball back and forth over to each side of the road, not very far from the weed-covered tombstone. Anyways, one day a man decided to take the road to his wife's house because it was a shortcut. Well, he made it. But he was not okay. Right after the short trip, his face swelled up as big as a platter, and every day he sat in the corner reciting, "I'm bored. I need my mommy," all over and over again. Because of the constant worry, his family decided to hire a priest, and the priest suggested that it is the boy. It was too late to save the man because the restless and angry spirit of the boy has taken over his body. So the only thing that they can do is to lock him in the cellar and feed him only holy water and bathe him with little dog blood in the washing water every day to keep the spirit weak. Suicide Turn is now no more. A hospital was built on it last year. Even though it is no more, its legend lives on. Reincarnation? I was told by my grandmother a while back that when I was about 3 years old, in 1983 that there was one day where I was in the bathtub when I suddenly started to speak very clearly. I said that my name was Paul somebody. She didn't remember the last name. I said that I was in Da Nang, Vietnam, and that I had been shot in the stomach, and that my buddy was helping me into the chopper. Then I snapped out of it and went back to being a 3-year-old. My grandma used to talk about when that happened all the time. I guess it freaked her out. I obviously don't remember it though. Oh well, there's my story. Make your own case. Psychic cat travels just to complain. Another grandparent story. I can no longer prove this as all letters have been lost over time. My grandfather did a couple tours in Vietnam and had 2 weird experiences. The first involves the cat, Chairman Mao. My grandfather had a dream where Mao walked up to him and said, "Your damn wife makes tuna casserole and I didn't get any juice from the can." My grandfather wrote my grandmother and included it in a "ha ha ha, isn't it funny what being homesick does to the mind" way. He was shocked to receive a letter back saying, "I didn't give him the juice because I mindlessly drained it into the sink." My grandmother never forgot to drain the juice into the cat's bowl. It was almost part of the recipe. It was so routine. Likely why the cat was pissed enough to travel to Vietnam to bitch about it. The second also happened in the middle of the night. My grandfather was awakened when something shoved him and roared, "Get up!" He leaped up terrified as shrapnel began raining down. He fled and after everything was over, he returned to find a large chunk of shrapnel where his head would have been. He carried that chunk of shrapnel everywhere, and it sat on the plate rack directly over the chair where he ate his meals. None of his buddies woke him. He never found out where the voice came from or what shoved him. He was a diehard skeptic and not very emotional. His only weird moment where his judgmental and mental health was called into question was when he was convinced owls were speaking to him during the darkest days of his grief after my grandmother died. He also stood and declared himself a shaman during a church elders meeting, after which he was removed from his church office. Unitarians are pretty open, but that was too out there for them. He never had any other experiences that he spoke of, which doesn't mean much. I mean, he was a very private man. Sad hotel spirit. This story took place in 2011 in a hotel room in Mui Ne, Vietnam. My then fiance and I, plus 7 others, went on a 3-day trip from central Vietnam all the way north until we reached Nha Trang. This trip was our wedding photo shoot, as we wanted all real scenery. My cousin, who owns the bridal studio, her husband and son, along with a camera crew of 3, all set off for this work and pleasure adventure. It was a very fun and exciting trip for all of us indeed. We would stop at 2 hotels. First was in the city of Mui Ne, only 4 hours away from Ho Chi Minh City. Mui Ne is known for their beautiful red sand dunes, and which we were also there to capture. Tourists can tour the dunes, and little children would run up to us in hopes that we would rent one of their plastic sleds to slide down the dunes. Sounds fun if you're dressed properly, though getting sand in your pants is unavoidable. Night fell upon us, and after dinner we all decided to hang out by the pool and have some drinks. We knew it wasn't going to be a late night, as we had planned to be up the next morning at 3:30 a.m. for makeup and hair. I know, 3:30 a.m. It was because the photographer had set up for us to take pictures on the sand dunes and capture the sunrise. and sunrise normally happens between 5 to 5:30. So by the time hair and makeup was done, plus getting to the dunes, which was another 20 minutes away, have breakfast, 3:30 a.m. would be idealistic. The hotel looked fairly moderate. Not too new, not too old. As you enter our room, the washroom is to your immediate left-hand side and the wall on the right. As you pass the washroom, there is a bed on the left wall, in between nightstands on both sides. Across from the bed was a TV, a round table, and 2 chairs. The ceiling had a blue LED lights installed, so we left those on at night as it wasn't bright or annoying. We settled into bed by midnight. As soon as we both laid there, I started to get a feeling of dread and a little anxiety. I told my fiance that I wasn't feeling right, and it wasn't from food or anything, but emotionally. Him, not so much a spirit or paranormal fan, just kind of mumbled, "Yeah, you're just probably not used to the room." I like to think of myself as an empath, and I can pick up energies of people and places very well. But when this happened, I didn't know it yet. I started to get really overwhelmed, and a huge wave of sadness suddenly washed over me, and before I knew it, I started bawling my eyes out. I couldn't explain why I felt the way I felt, and no, it wasn't from cold feet. So we actually ended up not sleeping and had to get up to have a cigarette on the balcony to calm me down. I couldn't wait for 3:30 to arrive, so we didn't have to be alone in that room anymore and have more people around us. The next day we talked a little bit about it, and my fiancé admitted that he felt off too, but didn't want to scare me, so he kept it to himself. He said that when I started crying though, he knew something wasn't right for sure and scared him even more. It's been 3 years since this happened, and I finally think I have an idea of what happened to that room. I'm guessing it was a woman's spirit and something tragic happened to her there. She was watching us at night. That's how we felt her presence. I think it's a woman because I can feel that way, and also because she knew I was a bride-to-be. It made her sad that she couldn't be. She didn't try to scare us, I only felt her sorrow. I just can't help but feel it was a suicide. I'm open to ideas. What do you think? I don't remember the name of the hotel or what number room I stayed in, but if this happens again and I'm not paralyzed with fear, I will pray for the spirit and hope that they can be sent into the light. Who and why are you shaking me? As I mentioned in my stories here when needed, I had a boyfriend pass away in 2008. 6 months before he passed away, he took a trip to Vietnam, his and my home country. For the first time in his life, he got to meet his aunts and uncles, as well as his cousins. His aunt didn't have much money or a big house, so my ex, Derek, and his 7 buddies went to stay at a hotel nearby. About 7 or 8 of them went back to Vietnam together and stayed in one big room. When he came back to Canada, he told me that their hotel was haunted. They stayed on the 2nd floor. He said someone would knock on their door every night and they would never catch who it was. Even though they were ready for it after a few times of it happening, they never caught the pranksters. At first they thought it was kids, but they never heard running after the knocks. Then one night, as they were preparing for bed, out of nowhere a water bottle flew across the room and smoked one of his buddies on the head. That's when they realized and confirmed that the knocks were not coming from a human. Flash forward to about 7 months after Derek passed away. I myself went to Vietnam for a visit. I felt the need to go to his city and meet his relatives as a closure for myself. I wanted to see where he was from, who his family were that he spoke about, and see what he saw. I asked his cousins to take me everywhere they took him and even sat at the tables that he sat. I stayed in the same hotel too, though I asked for any floor but the second and got the third instead, but it didn't stop the paranormal activity from happening. I stayed there for 4 nights and this only happened once. I got a room with 2 big beds and invited a few of his cousins to stay with me. They agreed happily, 1 guy and 2 girls on a bed and myself on the other. I remember reading about shaking beds and hearing other people's experiences with them. I have never experienced it myself until that night. I believe it was the first night I was sleeping, then woke up when I felt shaking. I did not open my eyes right away. For some reason, I am able to stay calm and composed as long as I don't open my eyes. So I laid there for a moment and thought to myself, I think the bed is vibrating. Yeah, it's definitely vibrating. Then I opened my eyes and sat up in bed. The shaking stopped. I looked around and saw nothing. The cousins were passed out, so I went back to bed. To be honest, I am extremely nearsighted, so unless it was moving, I probably wouldn't even know it was standing there, if it was. When the day came to check out, as I was riding the elevator down to the lobby, the elevator stopped at floor 2. Before it opened, I already had the feeling there would be no one there. So as it opened and closed to the air, I just said, goodbye. For the longest time, I only had one thought about the incident, was of course the spirit messing with me, but now I also put the possibility out there that it could have been my ex trying to protect me from whatever that was also there. So in the midst of it all, it caused the bed to vibrate during their face-off? I don't know, just being open to ideas. What do you think, members? My classmate Bill showed me how he died. I graduated high school in 1967, and the Vietnam War was nearing its peak. Many of us guys, including one of my classmates, Bill, who graduated that year, almost immediately found ourselves serving in the military. Bill had entered the Marine Corps and became an icon to us all, for we knew him by being the first to be killed in action. Bill was a comical and likable guy, and I considered him a friend, but not really a close friend, and by that I mean we didn't live in the same neighborhood, we didn't run or hang together, or anything of that nature. We did, however, have a few classes together and would hang out at school. We knew little about each other's personal lives, so I'm left to wonder why he, or perhaps I should say, my memories of him have haunted me throughout the years. In 1969, 2 years after Bill and I had graduated high school, and while serving in the military myself, my late mom notified me by letter that Bill had been killed in Vietnam. I heard later from other classmates that Bill was the point man on a routine patrol and was killed when he and the rest of his platoon were ambushed by the enemy. I was saddened by the news of Bill's death, of course. Thought of him often and prayed that he was resting in peace. As time went on, I continued on with my life, and Bill faded into a fond and sad memory that only came to light when someone or something reminded me of him. Many years passed, then one night while I slept, I was suddenly jolted awake by a dream. Or perhaps I should say, a nightmare of Bill. The really strange thing about the dream is that in it, I'm Bill. I'm seeing through his eyes. I'm walking point on a patrol. I'm scared, sweating from the heat, dirty, miserable, tired, thinking of home and mentally praying that I would be lucky enough to survive the situation I was in and make it home in one piece. I'm an old man at the age of 19. Although I was being as cautious as I had been trained to be, and with my weapon ready, I hunkered down as low as possible and slowly entered a bend in the trail through the jungle that I and the men behind me had taken. Without warning, and totally unexpected, a Viet Cong guerrilla appeared out of nowhere with his weapon aimed at me. For a fleeting microsecond, I had the urge, and this seems odd, to greet him with a wave and a smile. But before I could react at all, he fired his weapon. I heard the sounds of the shots, and at the precise time the round slammed into my chest, I'd wake up from my dream, terrified, confused, and wondering why that guy had shot me. At first, I considered the dream as weird, but still just a dream. But as times passed, I was awakened by the same dream a second time, then a third, then a fourth, up to, as best as I recall, a total of 8 times. It's always the exact same dream, and even though I know what's going to happen, I'm always caught completely off guard. It's one of those dreams that is so realistic, my first conscious thought is, what the hell just happened? I began to wonder after the third dream, is Bill trying to tell me something? Is he showing me exactly how he died? And why me and not someone closer to him? Is there something he wants me to do? Is it my overactive imagination? Or is it just simply that I'm losing my mind? Many years had passed, and I hadn't had what I refer to as Bill's dream for quite a long time. I entered college, and through that school I landed a part-time job mowing grass around the grave markers and headstones at our local national cemetery. I knew Bill had been buried at National, but I didn't know the exact location of his grave, so I had mentally put finding his grave on my to-do list. One day I was mowing around the headstones on a hillside in the center of the cemetery, where the flags flies at half-mast. I was pulling up my mower backwards a few steps and wondering where Bill was buried, when I half stumbled, half tripped over the headstone that marked the grave behind me. And when I read that headstone, my heart skipped a beat from the shock. It was Bill's. Out of over 58,000 gravestones and markers at National, I stumbled over Bill's. At the precise moment I was thinking of him, I thought to myself, what are the chances of that? Astronomical, I think, to this day. I turned the mower off and took a short break to collect my thoughts and regain my composure. While standing there, I noticed the graves of a couple of other guys I knew from school and my old neighborhood. Then, to put the icing on the cake, I had Bill's dream that same night for the first time in ages. Many years later, the wife and I went to Washington, D.C., and while there we visited the Vietnam Memorial Wall. I took the crayon and paper provided as a courtesy and got the names of all I knew, especially and including Bill's, from the wall. After we returned home, and even though I was unsure of any addresses, I mailed the names of those who were killed in action to, I hope, their surviving family members. It's been a long time since that last dream of Bill, and I'm unsure if there's any significance to those experiences, but I truly believe that Bill, in his own way and for unknown reasons, contacted me from the afterlife. So to Bill I say, your life in this world was cut way too short, but during the brief time you were with us, you made our lives happier and more pleasant. Your name is now immortalized on a memorial in our nation's capital, and it is visited by thousands of people from around this world each year. You are still in the memories of those of us who knew you, and I'm sure I can speak for us all when I say it was an honor to have known you. I hope to see you again, old friend, and until then, rest peacefully. Meat eater from Vietnam. This story took place in a small town in rural Vietnam. It was told to me by my uncle. People in that town lived in houses very near to one another. There were houses built close together with a mere 5 feet wooden fence separating their backyards. The backyards double up as their kitchen. Back then, they didn't have that great of a refrigerator to keep their meat from getting spoiled, so the only way for them to keep their meat was to put salt on the meat and store it in the kitchen at the backyard. They didn't have any special containers to put it in, but just inside a shelf on the table. Everything was well and peaceful in that small town until something strange happened to a family. On the night when it all started, the housewife of that family routinely stored their extra meat in the backyard. The next morning, as she was making breakfast, she found the piece of meat missing. She's furious. She went around asking everyone in the house where or what they did with the meat. Nobody knew what happened to that piece of meat, and they didn't give it much thought, too. The housewife was, although a bit upset, just went to the market and got more meat. That night, she did the same thing again with their extra meat, but this time she kept it in a different shelf to make sure no one would take it away. The next morning, she went back to the backyard and checked again, but found the meat missing. By then, she was very upset. She complained to her husband that their meat was stolen 2 nights in a row. They decided they should investigate further to solve the problem. The husband suggested that they stay up that very night and keep an eye at the backyard. They were determined to catch the culprit that very night. That night, the couple sat by the window overlooking their backyard. They turned off the lights after their children had gone to bed to make sure no one can see them from outside. It was a hot, full moon night with only the sounds of crickets and owls howling. Everyone in the small town was already in bed by midnight, except, of course, the couple who was getting more and more anxious. It was slightly after 1 a.m. when the couple saw the shadow of a person jumping over the fence into their backyard. Under the bright moonlight, they could work out it was a woman, though they couldn't see exactly who she was. Then, the woman walked closer and towards the piece of meat sitting in the shelf, just a few feet away from them. Once she gets her hands on the meat, we'll rush out and catch her red-handed, the wife whispered to her husband. As the woman reached out for the meat, the couple slowly moved towards the door. However, they were stunned by what they saw next. The woman was holding on to the meat and eating it raw. Under the bright moonlight also, they saw who the woman was. She was actually the old lady from next door. What gave them the creeps was the way she looked. The old lady looked as if she was being possessed. She was taking big bites and tearing the meat apart with her sharp teeth and fangs. After finishing up the meat, she just ran and jumped over the fence like a strong youth. The next morning, the couple went over to their neighbor's home to consult with them over what had happened. Of course, their neighbor was shocked to hear what happened and refused to believe that it was the grandmother of the family who did it. The neighbor told them that it was impossible because the old lady had been very ill for the last couple of days. The couple thought they had been mistaken and didn't give much thought to the old lady. That night, the husband and wife went out of town for some dealings. They left their 1-year-old baby at home with their babysitter. By midnight, the babysitter had put the baby to sleep and was sitting in the living room waiting for the couple to come back. The couple, however, did not come back until almost 1 o'clock. Just as they stepped foot into the house, they heard a loud scream from the baby's room, followed by an agonizing cry. The three of them rushed to the baby to see what had happened. As soon as they got into the room and turned on the lights, the parents' darkest fear came true. The old lady from next door was on her meat hunt again. However, there was no meat in the backyard that night. So she had come into the baby's room and was gnawing at the baby's arm instead. The old woman was clearly possessed by a demon. Her pale face and fangs showed it all. She had no sense of what or whom she was eating. The wife gave out a loud scream and the husband rushed towards the old lady to push her away. The old lady fell off the bed and jumped out through the window. The husband grabbed his son and dragged his wife and babysitter out of the house. They yelled for help from the neighbors and soon a few people had come out. The husband explained what had happened while a doctor attended to the baby. The neighbors were equally shocked, but they were determined to get the demon. They rushed to the old lady's house but found no one at home. So they broke into the house, running from room to room looking for the old lady. But she was nowhere to be found. They all ran back to see if she had got out of the house. One of the neighbors spotted someone on top of the roof and started to call out for the others. The neighbors surrounded the house and tried to get her down by throwing rocks at her. However, the harder they tried, the louder she would laugh at them. So they decided the only way to get her down and get rid of her at the same time was to burn down the house. They moved whatever valuables out of the house and started burning the house from inside. Stubbornly, the demon was still on top of the roof. Everyone was standing around the house seeing it burn down with the old lady on top. As the house was burning into an inferno, the demon is still up there taunting at them and running around up on the roof. Soon, she was trapped in the fire. As the house collapsed, the old lady fell down with the house. They all heard a blood-curdling scream that is so evil. And then there was silence. And that was the end of it. The next day, they searched the burnt-down house but couldn't find any ashes. All they found was a very small skull. No one knew what happened to that old lady or her family. Rumors had it that they moved out of town and the old lady had died before that night. What the people saw that night was the demon that had taken over the body of the old lady. This story may sound like a story in the movies, but it really did happen in a small town in Vietnam a long time ago. Sometimes in life, there's a lot of unexpected things. Seeing ghosts or listening to a ghost story is one. But there are more out there than just ghosts. You see, my opinion is ghosts don't really hurt you, but demons, now that's another story. They're as good as deranged lunatics.